If you're watching this, you probably suffer from the same affliction I do, Listomania. What I'm hoping to do in this video is soliloquize on how the Grand Sonata in B minor by the Hungarian composer Franz Liszt isn't just the greatest piano sonata ever composed, but possibly one of the greatest artistic achievements in music history. But first, let me take you on a personal journey of how I came to deeply love and understand this masterpiece. My journey began with Chopin, whose emotional potency and poetic elegance captivated me from the start. From Chopin, I naturally gravitated towards the profound humanity of Beethoven, Mozart's lyrical charm, and the transcendent universality of Bach. Each of these composers shaped my understanding and taste in music profoundly. But where does Liszt fit in? Once you know you're hooked on piano, it's only a matter of time before Liszt's presence imposes itself on you. Now, a much younger and foolish version of myself had the perception of Liszt as a superficial composer, a victim of his own legend. Like many listeners, I fell for the cliché, the rhetoric that Liszt, the greatest pianist of his time and possibly of all time, the prototype rock star and the hero of virtuosity, as impressive as all of that is, only composed flashy, showy, embellished pieces that are for all intents and purposes impossible to play, with little to no musical value, just to showcase his godlike level Ubermensch mastery of the piano, while also being a master arranger of the great orchestral works of more serious composers. I mistakenly believed his music lacked depth and sincerity, dismissing it as dazzling but ultimately hollow. So why is it so easy for listeners to overlook the emotional and intellectual depth beneath Liszt's dazzling surface? Well, I think the answer, at least in my experience, is that it's precisely because Liszt pushed piano technique to such extremes, marking an evolution of performance and technique. The virtuosity itself can obscure the emotional and philosophical layers beneath. However, if we take the time to look beyond this facade, what emerges is an entirely new world of profound musicality and intellectual depth. Liszt's virtuosity was not an end but a means, an inevitable byproduct of musical imagination, expressive ambition, and technical evolution of piano playing of that period. Liszt was a music scholar of the highest degree. He is descendant from Beethoven through Karl Czerny. He was a contemporary and friend of Chopin, Brahms, Wagner, and Schumann, to which the sonata was dedicated to. He arranged the entire Beethoven symphony cycle for the piano, as well as Schubert's song cycles and countless other works from Beethoven, Wagner, Mozart, and whatever music that touched him or was impactful during his time. Clearly, Liszt was not merely a flashy performer, but a deeply intellectual musical nerd, an obsessive scholar, and a philosopher whose medium was music rather than words. Would it be wrong to argue that he was perhaps one of the most knowledgeable figures of music during his time? Now, before exploring the sonata further, let's briefly address historical anecdotes, like Brahms falling asleep during Liszt's performance, or Clara Schumann refusing to play it, dismissing it as musical gibberish. Now, context matters here. These anecdotes emerged during the famous ideological battle of the era, the War of the Romantics. Brahms and Clara belonged to a conservative musical faction opposed to Liszt's progressive approach. Therefore, the weight of their judgments should be taken with caution, colored by ideological bias rather than objective critique. And perhaps this musical war deserves its own dedicated video soon. Now back to Liszt, aka the Dark Prince. Even without reading about Liszt, just by simply hearing his works, one cannot escape the fact that this composer has an obsession with darkness, death, gloomy Gothicism, and existentialism. He gave these things a sound, a solid musical representation, some of which may not be so easy on the ears, but that does not take away from their musical legitimacy. Liszt also had a particular fondness for the story of Faust and Mephistopheles, which appear throughout many of his works. In essence, Liszt's music was philosophy in sound rather than literature, exploring the human condition, struggles, and existential dilemmas. He was also a devout worshipper of the arts. As a teacher and pedagogue, he would give his lessons for free, and when he found out that another teacher profited 1,000,000 marks from their students, he said, "As an artist, you do not rake in 1,000,000 marks without performing some sacrifice on the altar of art." Now, for a composer that is solidified in history as the greatest pianist to ever exist, the man whose pieces are considered impossible to play, the man who makes conservatory students question their career choices with his transcendental etudes, the man who reduced great orchestral masterpieces into a single piano without missing a single note, one would expect a plethora of piano sonatas, right? Just like Beethoven's 32 sonatas, sonatas, Mozart's 18, Schubert's 21. Well, wrong. He only composed one sonata, and after listening to it for the first time many years ago, I disappointingly thought, that's it? Couldn't he have done more? Why does the Piano Man only have one sonata? It's not even a proper sonata, it's just one long 30-minute movement. The problem with highly intellectual works by prodigious geniuses is that they can easily fly over dumb little foolish heads like myself. I was so quick to dismiss it as not being a proper sonata, and I could rest easy because Brahms' snoring can justify it for me. But the thing is, I kept coming back, not because of the sonata itself, but that crashing Mephisto theme in the first 2 minutes kept bringing me back. I'd listened to various legendary pianists play it just to marvel at their skills and virtuosity. What I realized was that the more I listened to it, the more I began to uncover. I simply couldn't stop finding and discovering new things. Each listening revealed more depth, intricate thematic connections, complex developments, and a masterful musical architecture, all meticulously structured. Everything you expect from a conventional sonata is there, and there in extravagant fashion. Despite my limited formal music theory knowledge, I quickly understood that every note served a purpose. Liszt entered uncharted piano territory with not a single redundant note. The sonata is revolutionary. A sonata within a sonata, with multiple movements seamlessly woven into one continuous narrative. An entire performance of the piece generally takes from 25 to even 40 minutes, depending on the performer, in a single continuous sonata form movement, encompassing an exposition, development, and recapitulation. However, this single movement superimposes 3 and some argue even 4 movements, with each section having its own sonata form, with a fugue to kickstart the last movement, making this piece a sonata within a sonata. Sonataception. Now, in all honesty, I believe it's a gross understatement to call this work simply a sonata, or even describe it as symphonic. The very least I could concede with as a description is calling it a grand opera. Everything about this work is operatic in scale, larger than life, and the whole purpose of this video is to try and show you why. So, what does this sonata mean? There are a couple of theories regarding the narrative element, the most popular of which is that this piece is a musical depiction of the story of Faust, the man who sold his soul to the devil Mephisto, with Faust, Mephistopheles, and Gretchen being the subjects of the main 3 themes. Another popular theory is that it's a biblical allegory: God, the devil, Eden, and humanity's fall, possibly a musical program from John Milton's Paradise Lost. Another less popular theory is that it could be about Liszt's autobiographical struggle with his own personal demons. Or it could be just that the piece has no allegory, it's just pure abstract musical expression, or it could be a mix of all of the above. Whatever tale this piece could be about doesn't really matter. The structure of the musical ideas are clear to fit any narrative with. Personally, I feel the philosophy behind the piece is clearly existential. The sonata opens ominously, 3 creeping hushed notes which blossom into something shadowy that eventually leads to the crashing, menacing Mephisto theme. This theme is present throughout the sonata, recurring in various guises, evolving and morphing throughout the piece. One of the most incredible disguises are the instances where this theme morphs into something more human. That theme is exactly the same as the opening notes, yet it feels completely different now. This morphed Mephisto theme is then followed by the first appearance of the Faust theme, and these 2 different themes interact throughout the sonata. get the Gretchen theme, which usually comes around the slower parts of the sonata, pure beauty and grace representing humanity. Now, just knowing these three themes and hearing how they play out in the sonata will give you the bearings you need to understand what's going on. One of my favorite sections in the sonata is towards the latter half of the first movement. Now, use your imagination a bit. Recall the story of Satan seducing Adam and Eve to eat the forbidden fruit from the tree, with God finding out, getting angry, and banishing them from heaven. Liszt musically depicts this scene in the most vivid way. You can hear the Mephisto theme domineering with its argument initially, getting cheekier as the act is about to be committed. A masterclass in the art of seduction, until they finally cave in and become fully intoxicated by the forbidden fruit. Then the tragedy of the act itself, followed by God's anger and the banishment of Adam and Eve from his kingdom. Then I feel like the end of the first movement depicts humanity's first journey on Earth, with Mephisto descending down with them to fulfill his promise of corrupting mankind. Another incredible moment is the second appearance of the Faust theme outright, this time highly impassioned and extremely inflected, with Mephisto sneaking in later to extinguish the flame. I think this section is one of the most operatic instances of piano writing, cinema, pure cinema. Following this, we get a slow movement type feel, a sense of aimless wandering, which leads to the critical moment where the Mephisto theme returns in its first form, which then breaks into a fugue, a climactic turning point featuring an intricate weaving of the Mephisto theme in contrapuntal brilliance. It feels like a monster going through different skins, or something akin to a werewolf transformation on a full moon. This section elevates the sonata's complexity and emotional intensity, ultimately leading to a powerful re-emergence of the main Mephisto theme, setting the stage for the piece's dramatic resolution. The rest of the piece concludes with a battle of good versus evil, let's say, with the Faust theme emerging victorious, celebrating and reminiscing at the crazy journey it's had. Just as the piece ends with a calm resolution, the seemingly defeated Mephisto theme rears itself as the very final note of the sonata, a chilling plot twist ending that leaves you profoundly unsettled. No matter how victorious you are, your demons will always be chasing you. Of note, Liszt wisely revised his initial virtuosic ending for this contemplative, haunting conclusion, a decision underscoring his musical genius. Here's what the original version would have sounded like. I think I've listened to all the Liszt sonatas that are available online and on streaming services. I'm not joking. So I'm gonna recommend 6 recordings, 2 of which I think stand out above all else, and a ballet. These are just my own personal recommendations. If your favorite version's not there, there's no need for you to throw a hissy fit in the comments. Just recommend your own favorite interpretation and be civil about it. The single best version, in my opinion, if I had to choose one, would be the Vladimir Horowitz 1977 recording. Horowitz shows absolutely zero restraint and gives a gargantuan, epic performance worthy of what this piece demands. It may not be the cleanest recording out there, but it's certainly the most ambitious. Horowitz provides a clear narrative structure, showing his deep understanding of the music and the lore behind it. His rubato makes perfect sense, and his fortissimos here are one of the greatest I've ever heard, defying the odds of physics at how half of the strings didn't snap mid-performance. The other standout would be Martha Argerich's Deutsche Grammophon recording. This is without a doubt one of my favorite recordings of the piece, and if this was the only thing ever recorded by Argerich, then that alone would be enough to cement her status as an absolute legend. This recording is a tour de force, unforgiving and relentlessly ferocious. The tempo she takes is unbelievable, and the control she has over such a fast tempo just shows how she's ascended to a different dimension of piano playing. The solo sections are played with Chopinesque beauty, and her phrasing shows a deep understanding of the narrative structure as well. Then there's Claudio Arrau, a much tamer version of the sonata. This recording is elegantly poetic, highlighting the lyrical beauty of the music, with its slower tempo and impeccable phrasing, giving the listener clarity towards the performance indications. Then there is Sviatoslav Richter, who's extreme on both ends. Richter shreds the monstrous fast parts and enters a different realm with the slower sections. Some very interesting phrasings which I haven't heard any other pianists do. Then we have Alfred Brendel, who takes a more balanced approach. With Brendel, you get the cerebral element of listening, chord voicings, calculated dynamic changes, a deep understanding of the score. Brendel is deeply knowledgeable about the lore surrounding the sonata, and is a proponent of the Mephisto Faust theory. He has an interesting 3-hour-long masterclass on this work, which is very insightful. If Horowitz's version is a veteran theater actor sweating out the performance of a lifetime live on stage, then Brendel's feels like a Blu-ray DVD of a Christopher Nolan film. Then there's the 1993 Pogorelic recording, and the recording I'm referencing here is not the studio recording he's made of this, but rather a bootleg recording made through a camcorder from the audience during a recital in Spain. This recording is a perfect example of the archetype of the tortured artist. Pogorelic takes this piece and makes it entirely about himself in the most artistic way possible. The tempo is abnormally slower, and he plays it like he's trying to say something. He's using the profound music as a vehicle for his own expression. One of the most powerful recordings I've ever heard, and a testament to the piece itself, and that if you possess the right skills, you can express anything through it. Then the last recommendation I have is a ballet called Marguerite and Armand by Sir Frederick Ashton. This is a ballet danced to the Sonata in B minor, although the piece itself has been rearranged to add orchestra, and the performative merits, pianistically, of the musical structure diminishes. It does offer a great visual narrative value. The plot is a basic love story that has nothing to do with what Liszt had in mind, but the motific associations to each character will greatly help with understanding the overall plot and musical structure of the sonata. It's not a bad ballet either. Because of its massive popularity, I gotta say something about Zimmerman's infamous 76-take recording, because I know someone's gonna mention it in the comments. All I have to say is that it does more harm than good, and it's completely antithetical to the romantic spirit, which this piece fully represents. For the full argument on why I'm against this style, check out this video on my channel. In conclusion, Liszt's Sonata in B minor is a towering artistic achievement, profound exploration of human struggle, existential philosophy, and musical innovation. This video barely scratches its surface, but hopefully it inspires a journey of discovery, revealing endlessly rewarding insights. To my fellow Listomaniacs, welcome to a lifelong obsession. These videos are hit with copyright as soon as I publish them here and are ineligible for monetization. So if you enjoyed this content and would like to support me in making more, click the link below to buy me a coffee. And don't forget to like, subscribe, click the bell icon button, and I'll see you in the next one.